Let's welcome him. Hi everyone. Today I'm going to explain how I managed to introduce two-factor authentication from GitHub. But first I'll introduce myself. My name is Andrei Glushenko. I represent Infosys JET, where I was responsible for information security. For more than 10 years, I worked for JET department dealing with security. My team helps our customers to operate diverse information security management systems. This story began Friday evening, and I didn't expect any trouble. All of a sudden, my colleagues from another department called me and told me the following story. Some organization had been cracked and decrypted. My colleagues, they worked with their infrastructure from the scratch based on all the key principles of information security. Since the organization used firewall that we use in our department, my colleagues turned to me. Well, basically, it doesn't matter what kind of firewall you're using. We use as the first factor the username and password, and the radio server as the second one, which checks the password and sends push notification to the user. The question was what to do about the second factor. Well, basically, it's a task belonging to the operations. But in this particular case, I decided to undertake it. So I turned to my colleagues, those dealing with introducing two-factor identification for enterprise solutions, and they shared this battle map with me. It's a table of enterprise solutions, a comparative table, helping to understand which of those solutions better meets your requirements. I use it as an instruction to understand how to achieve integration with the firewall and send it to my colleagues, and then left for my weekend. However, on the next day, my colleagues returned to me and said, look, we're short of time. We need to do it as soon as possible. We need to get this done by Sunday afternoon. We needed to find backup copies, decrypt the database. Well, it was important to get the battle card, to compare solutions. So we had all those open source resources, although I wouldn't trust them initially, considering them to be Band-Aid solutions, mostly. The solution that was proposed, I didn't like it. It didn't provide for integration with information security management system. In that situation, we needed to complete our deployment as fast as possible. There was also previous ID, but I didn't like it either because of a number of limitations. For example, it was not possible to launch 50 tokens at a time. So I opted for LinOTP as a solution, which has an application for both Android and iOS. I also liked its policies and maintenance terms and conditions. And on top of this solution proved to be pretty popular. So I decided to deploy it, and I failed, which was pretty natural. Because the most recent version was 5 years old, so I decided to go my own way. I looked at traffic pattern, and eventually I did it. Initially, I was surprised. There was a guide that has never worked, so I decided not to use it. I tried to understand how it worked on my own, and it works as follows. There is a free radius which calls LinOTP with a patch. It listens to queries to get a token and get access to the account. I used PostgreSQL as a database. I had it available to me at that moment. Some more details. Let's assume we have firewall and the virtual machine deployed. At our firewall, we set up our solution as radio server, and we needed to check the second factor. The firewall sends requests to free radius, while granting the username and password. I will also mention a realm of the users. It sends requests to LinOTP. LinOTP calls PostgreSQL in order to make sure that the token does exist. The OTP is checked, and a response is sent, saying that free radius can send an accept message, which means that the second factor has been checked and it's okay. I managed to set it all up, but additional integration with AD was required. It was pretty easy to do it manually. You come up with a resolver and an account that's needed for that. It's important to use LDAP instead of LDAP for encryption, because in debugging, I had found out that LinuxIP was not shy to send login and password with a recheck. When I set up the integration with AD, I needed to inspect the system for potential conflicts in free radius. The same realm is written there, and it uses this config in turning to TCP. Policies also needed to be set up. On the server, there is a set of policies to be set up, and here is an example of policies allowing the user to get to the self-service portal. In other words, if the user is authorized and has the right to set up the IP address and ICP, it can create a token after authorization. Having done that, the user can get a token or some other authenticator and start using it. When I had that deployed and tested it, the question was how to check the operation of all those solutions in real-life environment. And it proved to be as simple as that. You come up with curl request to the web address and TCP and send your user ID and password previously created. And in return, you receive 200 as your status code, which means OK. You can go even further. You can engage the combination of LinOTP plus free radius by sending your request. The utility generates requests to the radio server from the TCP client. In this case, you need to send both the username and the password. And radius will add to this its own variables. And if you get this request, it means that it works. To summarize, in a short time frame, we managed to develop and test a plain and simple solution, deploy it in the organization, write instructions for integration. I did that, and I left for my vacation. Although it was Saturday night. On the next day, my colleagues called me using Telegram and said that the customer organization wouldn't use my solution because it was a foreign solution which they are not allowed to use. We had not been informed, which means that all the work that we did was useful. I tried to do the same with Yandex.Key. It didn't fly. I started just selecting applications available for iOS and Android, one after another, to find a client application. And I found out that in creating policies, I created tokens called Provision Google. But that required a Google identifier for automated distribution. My policies. Well, I managed to scan the code and add the key to the client. Next morning, we started thinking if we could have done anything bigger and better. As a result, we decided that the combination of three applications that we had used could also be used when you need to achieve something really fast. To do it even faster, I wrote this installation script, which was intended to request all the proper data, credentials, user ID, and password. And I went even further. I created a project on Docker Compose in the format of a single file with all the proper variables and installed it, deployed it in three containers, Postgre, JCP, and FreeRadius. All this was published at GitHub. You'll find there everything that you can see on the slide with instructions how to use it, how to load it, how to set it up and configure. And now I'll summarize. All the parties were pretty happy. And we now have a solution that can be used in a crisis situation. And the organizations that I told you about just failed to manage the crisis they had faced. And it means that you should be more careful in selecting your enterprise solutions. And we tested our solution with Docker and PID, which may not always be possible within 1.5 days. Today, people very seldom use open source because it gives rise to more problems that it can solve, especially in dealing with Windows vulnerabilities. However, if you are using remote access without a second factor, I highly recommend that you use this solution. It will make your system more sustainable. Moreover, some administrators grant themselves an additional access should the firewall fail, allowing to get backup access to their system. Since they are privileged users, they don't need the second factor either. And in some situations, it can be used as a backdoor to the organization system. And there is an enterprise solution which provides for using two-factor authentication. I suggest that you use it as your recovery plan. I suggest that you switch to such disaster recovery plan. Otherwise, you will need to just switch off the second factor or your remote access. That's everything as I promised. Here is a QR code for my GitHub repository. You will find all the information there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Коллеги, есть у кого вопросы?
Colleagues, if you have any questions.
Добрый день. Большое спасибо за доклад.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really great.
Организация, которая вернулась к выбору
Organization that came back to enterprise and they chose it. So how much time did it take for them to do that? And how did they figure it out based on open source what they want? So it took them 6 months. I was getting their feedback. For 6 months, this solution didn't fail. They have more than 120 users. And it took them 6 months to get to enterprise. So they said what they wanted, they formulated it, and they told us what functionality they needed. And that functionality for them, they needed it to raise a VPN and then, yeah.
Вопросы можно задавать в микрофоны в проходах.
Ask your questions. Mics are in the alleys. I wanted to clarify because not all the applications they support this second factor authentication. In fact, they don't have this field there. So in many solutions they use pushes. So you send a request and they confirm if it's you or not. Can this solution be integrated with push alerts and many other things? So yes, if you go there, there's functionality of it in the documentation. You can find this. You can customize the portal. There is instruction for self-maintenance if you need to, and there is a proof notifications and requests, and you can actually get the push notifications integration. Two questions about privacy ID. When you have 50 users, there are plugins, there is no limitation for the users. Privacy ID, yes. If you used, and as I understand, your organization didn't use Windows logon form for the second factor, if you used it, then it is 50. If you use Radius, then you can create users, synchronize it. My question is, there was a comment that was written there, but did organization have a dependence from the accessibility policy from the group that have the access? Well, let me comment on the clarification that you made. At that time, they wrote in forums there was a limitation, and they were saying that they didn't, and we need to start right away, and we didn't want to start with this limitation. And the second question that you asked, you said, were there dependent on the groups? So did you have like rules of access to one network, this different group of users to a different network? So did you have to do anything with compromising? That's what you mean? Second factor, right? So open source product with the second factor authentication. Then you need to transfer attributes from Radius. No, it actually defines the group of where the user is, and then after that it sends it. That's right. But as soon as you switch to the authorization based on Radius, I don't know what the checkpoint, but with any other vendor. For example, before you have the Active Directory, right? The groups were taken from Active Directory. Yes, there is Radius attribute is there, so they transfer it. But if you switch to Radius, then Firewall doesn't understand that that user that comes from Radius is actually linked to the group that is in Windows in Active Directory. There is no connection. How did you solve this problem? So we use a checkpoint for this. So first factor is AD. You need to understand what user in what group. So they wrote user, they know what the group is, and then they just do the second factor and they confirm the time password. Well, see, there was no mapping there, so for the point you don't need it. You can send requests to the Radius. Yes, it's possible. If you dig in there, you can actually correct the request, and at the entry level, what to send in MCP level and to the Radius client using the script. And small question. You had the password OTP plus password. It was done without challenge, right? It's at that point without challenge. Is there a possibility to do that? Yes, you can create PIN codes when you create a token. You can write such a policy that the user has to indicate a phrase, a key phrase, and without this you can't create a token. But the policy actually allows that. We just have 1 minute for a question. Very short one. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I heard multi-OTP, as if it doesn't support integration with AD. It doesn't support integration with AD. When I did the analysis during this short time, the problem was that with connection with Portal, there's a free version and integration with AD. So we couldn't get enough users there. So then the second question related to the slide on Synbox. It opens the last QR code of very famous vendor. Maybe it's just my problem. It's when I tried your QR code on the. And the third question.
Вопрос уже не остается времени. Задайте, пожалуйста, около сцены. Хорошо?
Хорошо.
So no time for the question. Could you ask the question? So the best question, please, and we give the book. I liked the question with about attributes.
Пожалуйста, за книжечкой.
Yes, this one. Please come and get the book.
Можете подойти, задать.
If you have a question, so please come to the stage and ask a question to the speaker. Thank you very much.